Yo, what's happening guys? It's Speio with the Voice of Reason, coming at you today with a new type of video as an alternative to the sound design stuff. Now in this new kind of format, I'll be going into detail on certain techniques within Reason, rather than just trying to reproduce a certain sound. Now, these techniques can pretty much involve anything. They can be mixing techniques or techniques involving a certain device, and so on. I'm calling this new series 5 reasonable ways to do stuff, and you can easily distinguish the videos belonging to it by the 5R tag in the title. Now I hope you can get some inspiration out of these videos and maybe even pick up on some information you didn't know before. Now in today's video I'll be going over 5 reasonable ways to get a dirty bass sound, and I've got this blank Thor here to assist me in the explaining process. Okay, let's get into it. Number 1, wavetables. So what is a wavetable? A wavetable is a group of waves, and you can choose between those waves using a position knob. Nowadays, a lot of dirty bass sounds are based on wavetable synthesis, and Reason got its fair share of wavetables to offer. In Thor, for example, we have the wavetable oscillator, and I'll quickly go over some of my favorite wavetables inside that one. The Mixed Waves 1 wavetable is absolutely brilliant because it instantly supplies you with a nice bass sound. Also cool is the PPG27 Formant wavetable. Also because you can bring the position all the way up to get a very metallic sound with this one. Okay, Thor isn't the only synth in Reason that can do wavetable synthesis. Maelstrom is even bigger in that respect because it has a lot more wavetables on offer. So one of my favorite on Maelstrom is definitely the throat wavetable. Now as you can hear on Maelstrom, the position knob is always automated by the motion up here, but you can bring the motion all the way down and then use the index slider as a position knob to get the classic wavetable kind of sound. And in combination with the shift knob, Maelstrom is a very powerful wavetable synth. But let's get back to Thor. Number 2, frequency modulation. Now in frequency modulation, an oscillator's frequency is modulated by another oscillator. And usually this is done with sine waves, and that is also the case with the FM pair oscillator within Thor. Now the FM pair oscillator supplies you with 2 oscillators, a carrier oscillator and a mod oscillator, and the numbers up here, they decide on which semitone this is playing. So I'd always suggest using a ratio of 12:1. So if I bring up the mod here to 12, you can hear, if I select Thor, you can hear the nice FM sound. Now I'm not really using the FM pair oscillator in Thor that often. I don't really like the sound of it, but what I do a lot is using analog oscillators for frequency modulation, using the modulation matrix down below. So if I just select a nice clean square wave here, and then chuck in a sawtooth wave beneath that one, and then select the oscillator 2 in the modulation matrix and route it with an amount of about 50 to the frequency of oscillator 1. Make that 30. We get a nice and dirty sound. Now, as I said, usually frequency modulation is done with sine waves, but I personally really enjoy using different waves for frequency modulation because you can get some really crazy stuff. Like for example, if you bring the octave all the way down on a sawtooth wave, modulating a square wave, you get this nice pitch kind of effect. Also, you can use wavetable oscillators as a source for frequency modulation. And as you can see, the second oscillator is not activated. So it really is it's just the mod, the modulation source for the upper oscillator. Now if you use a wavetable oscillator, for example the Formant one, to frequency modulate the square wave up here, it gives us a very dirty and nice sound. Also, I would not recommend going over like an amount of 50 or something for the frequency modulation when not using sine waves, because then it's basically just noise. But values beneath 50 can get you some very nice and dirty sounds. Okay, number 3, distortion. Now, distortion is probably the most popular way to get dirty bass sounds. And distortion normally works with the higher frequencies. So let me just quickly set up a filter automation here, so we can hear the distortion more prominently. So let me just select the LFO and route it to the filter frequency. There it is. And bring the rate up a bit. Okay, now the normal way to distort stuff in Reason is of course the Scream 4 distortion unit. And it gives us some very nice algorithms to work with. The most popular one in my experience is the tape algorithm, on which you can bring the speed all the way up and even bring the damage up a bit. And then use the compression knob to compress the signal, which is great because then you don't have to add another compressor beneath it. Or you of course you could add another compressor, but I like the tape compression on the Scream 4. Which just gives it a nice touch. But there are some little tips on the Scream 4 which you can use to get a very interesting and nice new sound. For example, the most popular one is probably using digital distortion, bringing the damage all the way down, the resolutions all the way up, and bringing the rate up to about 74, and then giving the filter that's modulated some resonance. That supplies us with the infamous yai sound. Okay, another cool tip is using the fuzz preset, bringing the tone and presence all the way up. Let me just quickly reduce the master a bit. And then giving it some damage. Also, you should bring down the resonance again when you do that. That just makes the signal very, very dirty. And then you can use the body to get this cool kind of, well, listen for yourself, I can't really describe it. Leave the resonance as it is, but bring down the scale to about 20 and bring up the auto to about 20. And then if I switch through some different body types, you can instantly hear the effect. It just kind of gives it a human touch, the very dirty bass, and I really like that. Now in the type section on the body, you can choose between 5 different types. B and C are like a little higher, while D and E sound a little lower, and A is kind of in the middle. They all sound cool in their own way, but my favorite's gotta be B and D. You can also play with the scale knob on the Scream 4 distortion unit to get some cool effects. Okay, now let's move on to number 4, pitch modulation. Now, pitch modulation can occur in different forms. Now, the most popular one is probably just using the pitch bend, where I suggest bringing up the range to 12, so you got a nice clean octave of pitch modulation. But that still doesn't sound very dirty or anything. What's pretty cool in Thor, you can use an LFO or pretty much any modulation source to modulate the oscillator pitch directly in the modulation matrix. And you can get some really cool sounds using this kind of setup. Even like Mario kind of sounds. So play with the LFO wave and like the amount that the pitch modulation amount, and again you can get some really nice and cool sounds. Also, I'd suggest using the basic analog wavetable for this kind of sound, because you can dirty it up a little using the position knob. I really like the sound of that. So pitch automation is always a good idea, and modulation in general. Okay, and number 5, the Formant filter. The Formant filter has got to be a personal favorite for me. So it's just select the Formant filter for the filter 1 and run a square wave into it with a relatively high PW. Set the little sphere here somewhere in the middle and bring the gender all the way down, and you instantly get this nice kind of human sound. If you then select an LFO and modulate the Y component on the filter, you got your little yoy going. You can then automate the X component to change it to a yai from time to time. There are some very cool sounds possible with this kind of setup. Also, play with the gender to find a sound that fits your style. I just love the sound of the Formant filter in Thor. You can also use different oscillators for that, of course. Like if you build a very big kind of respace style with lots of multi-oscillators, it also has a very great sound to it. Just detune some of those against each other. You can get this kind of big weird sound. Also, if you disable the filter here, you get a nice little respace, which is always great too. Okay, now these were 5 reasonable ways to get a dirty bass sound happening in Reason. Of course, you should experiment with these ways and find out your own kind of bass style, and also combine these. Of course, you can have a wavetable FMing a normal analog oscillator, distort the whole thing, modulate the pitch, and then run it through a Formant filter, or run a part of it through a Formant filter to get like the ultimate dirty bass going. Okay, this video was inspired by this comment by Camped1. Thanks for the inspiration. If you want to have like a certain topic dealt with like this 5 reasonable ways scheme, then just leave a comment on whatever you want covered, and I'll do a video on it. Also, I'd be very grateful if you could leave some comments on this format in general, and if it's something I should continue, or if I should continue making the sound design videos rather than this kind of video. Okay, this has been Speio with the Voice of Reason, and be reasonable. I'll see you next time.